Millionaire caught the maid protecting his disabled daughter and was shocked by the truth. She was on her knees, scrubbing the cold marble floor with her bare hands, tears rolling down her cheeks, while a little girl with no legs cried helplessly in the corner of the room. At that exact moment, the door opened and the millionaire froze in disbelief. Hi, I'm John Parker, and today's story will touch your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like. It's very important to me, and write in the comments which city or country you're listening from. Now let's begin. Paloma Gomez had only been working at the Montclair mansion for 3 days. She was just a maid, hired to clean rooms and sweep the grand staircase, nothing more. But destiny doesn't ask permission before rewriting someone's life. That morning, as she carried a bucket upstairs, she heard screams coming from the second floor, screams that froze her blood. She rushed to the master hallway and pushed open the heavy wooden door. The sight nearly made her collapse. On the floor, little Manuela Montclair, just 6 years old, dragged her fragile body, her dress torn, her arms trembling as she tried to reach her wheelchair. The chair had been pushed far away, out of her reach, and next to it stood a tall woman with eyes as sharp as daggers, Rebecca Sandoval, Alejandro Montclair's mother-in-law. Rebecca's voice echoed like poison. "Stop crying. You were born defective. At least don't be weak as well." The words shattered the child's spirit. Her face crumpled, tears rolling down her cheeks. She whispered, "Please, Grandma, help me get back in my chair." But Rebecca only pushed the wheelchair farther, her lips twisting into a cruel smile. "In this world, no one is going to pity you, Manuela. You need to learn that lesson now." Paloma couldn't stand still. She dropped her bucket and rushed forward. "Hi, Princess," she said softly, crouching down. "Let me help you." The little girl immediately hid her face behind her small hands. "Don't look at me. I'm ugly." Paloma's heart broke. She leaned in closer until her eyes were level with the child's. "Ugly? You have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen in my life." For the first time, Manuela stopped crying. No one had ever told her she was beautiful. Paloma lifted her gently and placed her on the wheelchair. Manuela smiled, a timid but radiant smile. "There," Paloma whispered. "Now you're back on your throne, Princess." But Rebecca exploded with fury. She stormed forward, grabbed Paloma by the arm, and yanked her away from the child. "Who do you think you are? Don't you dare help this useless girl. She needs to learn the hard way." Rebecca shoved Paloma down to her knees. "This is where maids like you belong, on the floor." Tears streamed down Paloma's cheeks as Rebecca forced her to scrub the tiles with her bare hands. Behind her, Manuela shook with fear, too terrified to speak, and then, suddenly, the sound of the front door echoed through the mansion. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs. The bedroom door opened, and there, standing in the doorway, was Alejandro Montclair, the millionaire, Manuela's father. His eyes locked on Paloma, broken on her knees, on Manuela, trembling in her wheelchair, and on Rebecca, standing like a cruel queen in her kingdom of lies. Alejandro's voice cracked with a fury he had never known. "What in God's name is happening here?" The moment their eyes met, Alejandro knew this maid was not ordinary. And Paloma knew her life would never be the same after this day. But what Alejandro didn't know was that the truth buried in this house went far deeper than cruelty. Secrets, betrayal, and redemption were about to unravel. And nothing, not even his wealth, could prepare him for what he was about to discover, and that was only the beginning. Alejandro Montclair stood frozen at the doorway, his jaw tightening as his eyes swept the room. He had left early that morning for meetings in downtown Chicago, never expecting to return home before lunch. But fate had pulled him back sooner and, perhaps for a reason, there she was. His daughter, little Manuela, cheeks streaked with tears, her tiny body trembling in her chair. And there on the floor was the new maid, Paloma Gomez, her hands red from scrubbing, her face wet with humiliation. Standing over them like a monarch of cruelty was Rebecca Sandoval, his late wife's mother. "What is going on here?" Alejandro's voice boomed louder than he intended. Rebecca's face shifted instantly, as if she was slipping on a mask. Her lips curved into a false smile. "Alejandro, thank goodness you're home. This girl was interfering with Manuela's development. I was teaching her independence. She needs to learn not to rely on others." Alejandro's eyes narrowed. He knelt down beside his daughter. "Princess, is that true?" Manuela's lips trembled. She leaned toward him, whispering words so soft only he could hear. "Daddy." Grandma hid my chair again. Alejandro's blood ran cold. He glanced at the chair shoved across the room, far from the bed. Something inside him cracked, but he held his composure. Rising slowly, he turned to Rebecca. Why was the chair away from her bed? Rebecca crossed her arms, her tone sharp, but controlled. "I told you, she has to be strong. The world will never hand her kindness. Better she learns now." Alejandro's jaw clenched. He wanted to unleash his fury, but instead he forced himself to breathe. "Leave us now!" Rebecca stiffened. "Alejandro!" "I said now!" His voice thundered through the house. Rebecca's eyes darkened, but she left, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was heavy. Paloma, still on her knees, struggled to rise. Alejandro turned to her. For a brief moment their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Pain, recognition, and something else neither could name. I'm sorry, sir," Paloma whispered. "I didn't mean to disobey. I just couldn't watch her suffer." Alejandro exhaled deeply. "Don't apologize. If anything, I should be the one apologizing for what you've had to endure in my house." He turned back to his daughter. "Manuela, are you hurt?" The little girl shook her head. Her eyes glistened, though, not from pain, but from something else, a spark of hope. That night, Alejandro couldn't shake the image of his daughter's face. For months, he had buried himself in work, numbing the grief of losing his wife, Carolina. He had trusted his mother-in-law to manage the household and care for Manuela. But now, doubts began to creep in. Downstairs in the kitchen, Paloma tried to focus on her chores, but the image of the girl's fragile smile lingered in her mind. And Rebecca's threat echoed. "If I ever catch you filling her head with nonsense again, you'll be out on the streets." Later, as Alejandro returned from his study, he found Dolores, the elderly cook, preparing soup. "Doña Dolores," he said cautiously, "tell me the truth. How does Rebecca treat Manuela when I'm not here?" Dolores froze, the knife trembling in her hand. She had worked in the Montclair mansion for 15 years, but loyalty to Alejandro often clashed with fear of Rebecca. Finally, she whispered, "Senor, I shouldn't, but you deserve to know. The senora hides the girl's wheelchair, leaves her on the floor for hours, tells her terrible things, that she is the reason her mother died." Alejandro's breath caught. He slammed his fist against the table. "Enough, no more." That night, he tiptoed into Manuela's room. She was asleep, her small chest rising and falling, her cheeks still damp with dried tears. He knelt by her bed, his voice breaking. "I swear to you, my princess, Daddy will protect you. From now on, nothing will ever hurt you again." But in the hallway, hidden in the shadows, Rebecca listened. Her eyes burned with fury. Alejandro was slipping from her control, and Paloma was the reason. The next morning, when Paloma arrived early to work, she found the little girl's door locked. "Manuela," she whispered through the wood. From inside came a trembling voice. "Paloma, you came back? Grandma said you left." Paloma pressed her hand against the door. "I told you I'd never leave, and here I am." When the door creaked open, Manuela wheeled herself out, her eyes swollen from crying. Paloma crouched and held out a small children's makeup kit she had found. Want to play a game? Let's make you a princess. Manuela's eyes lit up. As Paloma brushed a soft blush on her cheeks, the girl giggled for the first time in months. "Look at me," she whispered. "I look like myself again." But then the door burst open. Rebecca stormed in, her face twisted with rage. She yanked the makeup off the vanity and scrubbed the child's face with cruel force. "Makeup won't hide your defects," she hissed. "Your mother crashed her car because she couldn't stand having you." Paloma's heart shattered. "Don't you dare say that," she cried. And just as Rebecca raised her hand again, Alejandro's footsteps echoed down the hall. Alejandro's footsteps hit the hardwood like a gavel. 1, 2, 3. And then he filled the doorway, storm-gray eyes taking in the ruin, the makeup smeared across Manuela's frightened cheeks, the maid on her feet now, hands lifted in instinctive defense, and Rebecca Sandoval with her fingers still clamped around a handkerchief like a weapon. "What exactly are you doing?" the millionaire asked, voice low and dangerous. Rebecca slipped, as always, into her rehearsed benevolence. "Teaching your child resilience. The world won't grant pity. You know that, Alejandro." Paloma stood her ground. "Sir," she was shaking. She only wanted to see herself as a girl, not a burden. His gaze flicked to Manuela, the child he'd promised to protect the night before. He reached for a soft towel, dampened it, and dabbed gently at his daughter's face. "You look perfect," he murmured, "exactly as you are." Then, to Rebecca, "Leave, now." They ate a silent lunch under the glassed-in sunroom, the North Shore sky a pale Chicago blue beyond clipped hedges and an old maple. Manuela picked at grilled cheese triangles. Paloma refilled lemonade. Alejandro stared past both, jaw tight. In these ordinary motions, a truth hardened. Something in this house was sick, and it wasn't the child. It was Dolores, the cook with a voice like warm tea, who finally told him the parts no one tells a man drowning in meetings and shareholder calls and grief. Later, by the butcher block island, she spoke softly. How many times the wheelchair had been hidden, how harsh words had been fed like poison. "You're the reason your mother is gone." Alejandro's knuckles went white around the counter's edge. "No more," he said again, and this time it sounded like a vow. That evening, when the house exhaled, the dog walker done, the gardeners gone, Lake Michigan's breeze threading through linen drapes, Paloma climbed the main stairs. She wasn't just a maid anymore. Somehow in 3 days, she had become a quiet nanny of spirits, guardian to a wounded little girl, and perhaps to a wounded father too. Yet the pressure of being only the maid meant she had to move like a shadow. At the end of the second floor corridor, a door waited. It had been closed since the funeral. Carolina's room, the late wife, Manuela's mother, the woman whose smile still lived in framed photographs and whispered from silk scarves in the hall mirror. Paloma turned the handle, and to her shock it gave. Not locked, she slipped inside, careful, reverent. Sheets draped the furniture like ghost veils. The room smelled faintly of jasmine and old books. On the vanity, a perfume bottle caught a slash of afternoon sun. On the wall, a snapshot of 3, Alejandro younger and laughing, Carolina radiant, and baby Manuela swaddled in pale pink. The air felt holy, but there was tension in it too, a violin string drawn tight. Paloma opened drawers. Quietly, the way women who've folded other people's lives know how to open drawers. Socks, silk gloves, a ribboned bundle of letters addressed to Caro in Alejandro's hand. Nothing treacherous. She almost closed the last drawer, then felt paper stuck beneath a stack of handkerchiefs. She eased it free. A single envelope. "My beloved Alejandro," written in a tidy, certain script. Her hands shook. She read, "If you're reading this, something happened to me. I've discovered serious things about people close to us. I need more proof, but if anything happens, go where we kept our dreams. You'll find the truth. Protect Manuela. She may be in danger too. I love you always, Carolina." Paloma's breath hitched. The words seemed to ring in the stillness. People close to us. Danger, where we kept our dreams. Where was that? Then tires on gravel. A car door. Voices. Paloma slid the letter inside her uniform pocket. Footsteps mounted the stairs. Instinct pressed her toward the closet. She slipped inside, pulled the door nearly shut, leaving a thin line of light. The bedroom door swung open. Rebecca's perfume announced her before her voice did. "I knew someone would sniff around," she said, and the irony was acid. A man answered, a crisp, controlled baritone, Armando Delaney, the so-called family attorney who'd always hovered, always arrived too quickly when trouble brewed. "You're sure it was the maid?" he asked. "She has ideas above her station," Rebecca replied. "She's got Alejandro's sympathy. That makes her dangerous." Armando wandered the space. "You're positive Carolina hid something here?" "She said she knew things about us," Rebecca snapped. "We never found anything. Maybe she bluffed. Maybe she didn't bluff," Armando cut in quietly. "Caro never bluffed." From the closet's sliver of light, Paloma watched their shadows cross. Her heart beat so loudly she feared the wood would thrum with it. "What do we do about the maid?" Armando asked at last. Rebecca's answer was ice. "What we did before. Accidents are common, and once she's gone, Alejandro will sign Manuela into a special facility. Without the child in the picture, control becomes simple." Armando gave a dry chuckle. "Neat! Let's go," Rebecca said. "We'll search again later." Their steps receded. The door clicked shut. Paloma waited 3 long minutes, then slipped out, palms damp. She leaned on the vanity to stop, the shake in her knees. Accidents are common. Betrayal, family secrets, another woman's blood already soaked into the history of these walls. And now, a plan for more. She needed a lifeline. Down in the kitchen, Dolores looked up from a cooling rack of cornbread and saw the color gone from Paloma's face. They stepped into the herb garden, mint brushing their ankles, cicadas buzzing in the maple. Paloma showed her the letter. Dolores read and sagged onto a bench. "Dios mío, I think they killed Carolina," Paloma whispered, "and they're planning something for me, for the child." Dolores grabbed her hands. "You must leave. And abandon Manuela? Never." "Then we must be smarter than they are," the older woman said. "Smarter and faster." When the garage door hummed again, Alejandro was home. He glanced from Paloma to Dolores and saw the alarm in both faces. What happened? Paloma breathed once, twice, then handed him Carolina's letter. He read, lips pressed tight, the muscles in his jaw working. "Where we kept our dreams," he repeated. "Does that mean anything?" Paloma asked. A memory flickered across his features. "Yes, the attic studio. It used to be a playroom. Carolina called it our dreaming room when we talked about writing a book together." He looked at Paloma with a decision forming in his eyes. "Come." They climbed the narrow back staircase to the 3rd floor, past a window that framed Lake Michigan's slate-blue shimmer. Cobwebs netted the rafters. In the corner, an old drafting table waited. Alejandro pulled open its drawer. Nothing. He ran his hands underneath, searching for a seam, a false bottom, and found one. The panel pried loose with a soft pop. Inside, a thick manila envelope. He broke the string and slid out documents, bank transfers, notarized pages, phone records. The first sheet was a letter dated a week before Carolina's crash. "Alejandro, I have some proof. Rebecca and Armando have been siphoning your money for years, but I fear there's worse. If anything happens to me, find Detective Luis Martinez at the 18th District. He's the only one I trust." Alejandro sank onto a dust-streaked stool, stunned. "They robbed me," he said, but his voice carried a deeper grief. "They used me. They used my child." Paloma, sorting through the stack, found a file of adoption records and a brittle photograph of a young couple, Eduardo and Elena Montclair. "These names," she murmured. "They're your parents, aren't they?" He blinked, confused. "I mean, Rebecca raised me after they died. She always said she may have taken custody, not given life," Paloma said gently. "Caro suspected it." family secrets, betrayal. The words were lead weights in the attic's stale air. A door slammed downstairs. Voices, Rebecca's. Sharp syllables, another man's stride. He looked at Paloma, and she slipped the documents back inside the envelope. They descended, the millionaire now a man in stealth, the maid suddenly an ally, the would-be nanny a shield for the child who anchored them both. Rebecca was waiting in the living room, chin lifted, pearls steady at her throat. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "Giving Paloma a proper tour," Alejandro said coolly. "Dolores knows the house history better than anyone." Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I need a word. Alone." They stepped into Alejandro's office, paneled in dark walnut. Paloma hovered near the doorway, the air electric. "She is turning the household upside down," Rebecca hissed. "The maid, you're blinded by grief and pity, and she's exploiting it. The child needs professionals, not a nanny whose only qualification is making cheap dolls." Alejandro's tone shifted. Colder now, measured. "I've decided about Paloma," he said. "I'm going to keep her here. Close." Rebecca laughed once, brittle. How noble, and what would Carolina say? Carolina, he answered, would say what she wrote. He let the sentence hang, a blade without quite drawing blood. For the first time, Rebecca faltered. "What did you say?" "I have questions," he replied evenly. "Like why my wheelchair-bound child is punished for crying, and why you told her she killed her mother, and why the car was hauled to a scrapyard the very next day before I saw it." Rebecca's nails tapped the arm of a chair. "You are upset," she said. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." Her gaze flashed. "Careful, Alejandro. You wouldn't want to make enemies. Of family." "What family?" he asked softly. "Mine died in a wrecked car and a little girl's tears." She stood abruptly, the chair legs screeching. "I'm going out," she announced. "We'll resume this when you've calmed down." He watched her stride through the foyer toward the porte-cochere. A minute later, another engine caught, faded down the drive. Silence followed, taut as a wire. Back in the kitchen, Paloma and Dolores waited. Alejandro set the envelope on the counter, both hands flat. "She knows something," he said, "and she's running to tell Armando." Paloma looked toward the ceiling, toward the small girl 2 floors up who had learned to laugh again, only yesterday. "They won't stop," Paloma whispered, "not until they get what they want." Alejandro nodded. "Then we get there first." From the backyard, the gardener's blower went quiet. From the hallway, a clock inlaid with mother-of-pearl clicked to the next minute, and from upstairs, faint as a wish, Manuela's voice carried, "Daddy!" Paloma squeezed Alejandro's arm. "Go to her. I'll lock the side doors. Dolores, stay with me." They moved swift and certain, a small army against an old empire of lies. In a house of marble and glass and million-dollar art, the richest thing was finally stirring: courage. But by dusk, a new threat would arrive, not with whispers, but with a phone call that turned the air to ice. And when the phone rang, what Rebecca demanded would force the millionaire to choose between his fortune and his child. The shrill ring of the phone shattered the tense calm. Alejandro snatched the receiver before the second chime. His knuckles whitened around the handset as a voice he knew all too well slid through the line, silky, venomous. "Hello, Hijastro," Rebecca purred. "Are you ready to listen?" Alejandro's chest tightened. "Where is Manuela?" A tiny, muffled cry in the background twisted the knife. "She's here with me," Rebecca continued, her tone now cold steel. "Safe, for now. But if you want to keep her that way, you'll do exactly as I say." Paloma and Dolores stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide. Alejandro held the receiver tighter, forcing his voice calm. "What do you want?" "You will send the maid away. Permanently. Then tomorrow you'll sign documents transferring control of your assets to me." If you hesitate, if you even think of calling the police, you'll never see your daughter again." Alejandro's free hand clenched into a fist. "Rebecca, she's a child, my child. How can you—" "Don't play the father now," Rebecca snapped. "You were too busy burying yourself in work to notice her pain. I raised you, Alejandro. I kept this family alive. And if I must, I'll decide who lives and who doesn't. You have 1 hour. Meet me at the old barn on your grandfather's ranch. Alone. If I see anyone else, she pays the price." The line went dead. Alejandro lowered the phone slowly, his shoulders trembling. Paloma stepped forward, desperate. "We can't let her control you. We can't let her decide Manuela's fate." "She has my daughter," Alejandro muttered. His voice cracked, the iron cracking into fear. "She has her." Dolores placed a hand on his arm. "Then we fight smart. She thinks you'll go alone. We won't let you." Paloma's voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "I'll go too, not beside you, hidden. While she watches you, I'll find Manuela. Dolores can stay near the car. If we're not back in 20 minutes, she drives straight to the—" "Sheriff!" Alejandro turned on her. "No, too dangerous. If something happened to you—" Paloma met his eyes without flinching. "I already told you. Manuela is my daughter now too. I won't stand aside." The millionaire's throat tightened. It was the first time anyone had claimed his child as their own since Carolina's death. "Paloma," she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. "I'll record everything. If Rebecca or Armando confess, that recording will bury them. Even if we don't make it out, at least the truth will." For a long moment, the only sound was the steady ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall. Finally, Alejandro nodded, a grim decision carved into his face. "We do it your way, but God help them if they touch her." The drive to the ranch was cloaked in silence, broken only by the hum of tires over gravel and the shallow breathing of 3 people about to gamble everything. The sun was bleeding out over the Illinois horizon, painting the fields red as though foreshadowing what was to come. They parked half a mile from the weathered barn, its silhouette cut against the dying light like an omen. Alejandro turned to Paloma one last time. His hand found hers, rough palm against trembling fingers. "If we don't make it—" "Don't," she interrupted, eyes fierce. "We're walking out with her. That's the only ending I accept." Dolores crossed herself, whispering a prayer. Alejandro kissed Paloma quickly, urgently, as if sealing a pact. Then he stepped out, walking straight toward the barn with a steady gait, a father ready to trade everything for his child. Paloma circled through the tall grass, crouched low until she reached the broken side window. Peering in, her heart stuttered. Manuela was there, tied to a chair, her small wrists bound with rope. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but when she saw her father step through the front doors, they lit with hope. "Papa!" she cried out. Alejandro lunged forward, but Armando appeared from the shadows, gun drawn, blocking his path. "Not another step!" Rebecca emerged behind Manuela, her face twisted with triumph. "Did you bring the documents?" she asked. Alejandro raised empty hands. "First let her go," Rebecca smirked. "Oh no, first you sign, then maybe I'll consider it." Paloma's breath fogged the glass as she listened, her phone already recording every word. She glanced at the ropes cutting into Manuela's, her wrists. She couldn't wait much longer. Inside, Alejandro tried to stall. "What did Carolina ever do to you? She trusted you, and you killed her." Rebecca's eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped to a whisper sharp as glass. "Carolina was too clever. She asked too many questions, just like you." Paloma's pulse thundered. She had her confession, but before she could move, Rebecca lifted her hand, pointing the gun not at Alejandro, but at Manuela. "Sign now," she hissed, "or I end it all." Paloma's muscles coiled, ready to strike. She knew she had one chance, and in that moment, as the trigger began to tighten, the maid made her move. But what happened when Paloma leapt from the shadows would change the fate of every soul in that barn. Paloma didn't think. She moved. The maid exploded from the dark like a thrown spark, slamming her shoulder into Rebecca's ribs. The gun roared. The shot cracked through the rafters, splintering a beam and raining dust over the child. Manuela flinched but did not scream. She watched with those wide, brave eyes that had already seen too much. Alejandro lunged at Armando. The millionaire wasn't a fighter by nature, but some instincts don't ask permission. He hit the lawyer, low, driving him backward. The pistol skittered across straw toward a rusted milk pail. The men crashed into a hay bale, grunting, grappling, forearms locked like iron bars. "You won't touch my child," Alejandro hissed through his teeth. Paloma rolled with Rebecca, clawing for the gun. The older woman was wiry, shockingly strong, her pearls snapping loose and bouncing like marbles in the dust. "Know your place," Rebecca spat, trying to bring the barrel up. Paloma jammed 2 fingers beneath the trigger guard so hard her knuckles burned. "My place," she panted, "is between you and that child." With a wrenching twist, Paloma torqued Rebecca's wrist. The gun clanged free. Paloma kicked it under a wooden pallet and scrambled to Manuela, breath ragged, hands already working the rope with trembling urgency. "Look at me, princess," she whispered, meeting the child's gaze. "Count to 10. Slow. Breathe with me." Manuela obeyed, each number a tether pulling her back from terror. Straw dust turned the barn light into a hazy halo, a Midwestern chapel of wood and weathered ladders. Outside, the prairie wind pushed against old boards. Inside, betrayal pressed against every rib. Armando slammed a knee into Alejandro's thigh and broke free, eyes glittering with cold calculation. In one smooth pivot, he seized a pitchfork and drove the tines forward. Alejandro ducked. Wood bit his shoulder anyway, ripping fabric. He staggered, then bore in again, catching Armando at the waist and driving him into a post hard enough to shudder the whole structure. "Enough!" Armando growled, spitting straw. "Sign what I brought, and this ends. This ends when you're in chains," the millionaire shot back. The last coil of rope fell from Manuela's wrists. Paloma pulled the girl into her arms, kissing the crown of her head like a mother who'd had to learn motherhood in a hurry. "Can you wheel?" she asked softly. Manuela nodded, jaw set. The nanny that wasn't, the maid that was, shoved the ancient chair forward, but its brake had been engaged and jammed tight. Rebecca smirked from the floor, blood at her lip, planning ahead, try again. Paloma's phone, already recording, hummed in her apron pocket, capturing every word, the threats, the demands, the confession that had slipped out when Rebecca lost control. Paloma palmed the device inside the pocket, terrified she'd drop. It more terrified she wouldn't catch what still needed to be said. "Why, Rebecca?" she asked loudly, eyes never leaving the jammed lever. "Why destroy a child?" Rebecca's laugh was short and ugly. "Children are leverage." And Alejandro, he was leverage too. Armando's eyes snapped to her. "Shut up." "Tell him," Paloma pressed, voice ringing through the barn. "Tell him the family secrets. He deserves the truth." Alejandro faked left and drove right, slamming Armando into the support post again. "Say it," he barked. Rebecca rose, shaky but savage. "You were never my son, Alejandro. You were my investment. Your parents, Eduardo and Elena, were careless with power. They died. I made sure your name survived in my hands." "Your hands?" Alejandro's voice broke. Not with weakness, something older, a boy finally hearing the ghost under his bed speak. "What did you do to Carolina?" Rebecca's eyes gleamed. "She figured out that Armando and I had siphoned your money for years. She found the ledger." Her smile sharpened. "She didn't get to the courthouse." Armando swore and lunged again, as if he could tackle those words out of existence. Alejandro met him, this time more fury than form. Their fists cracked, hay flew, and an old barn dove startled from a joist and winged for the eaves. "Keep talking," Paloma said, loud, steady. She put her weight on the brake, fingers white on the lever. It shrieked and finally gave. The chair rolled half an inch. Tell the rest. Rebecca's voice turned glacial. Sign over control, Alejandro, or the child doesn't leave this barn alive. Paloma felt Manuela's small hand clutch her sleeve. That tiny grip anchored her, maid, nanny, guardian, all the names that didn't quite cover what love had made of her. We're getting out, she whispered. Do you trust me? The child nodded, the bravest yes Paloma had ever heard. Armando's boot struck a lantern someone had left by the wall. It toppled, flame-licking oil-licking straw. Paloma's stomach dropped, heat flared, smoke unfurled like a serpent under the rafters. No, Alejandro choked, eyes cutting to the growing fire. Manuela! Rebecca blinked at the rising. Orange. For the first time, panic cracked her mask. Armando, forget it, he snapped. Grabbing for the pistol under the pallet, he came up with the gun and swung it toward the millionaire. Move away from the chair. Paloma shoved Manuela's wheels toward the side window. The broken pane she'd used moments earlier. Heat pressed against their backs. The old barn groaned like a living thing remembering how to die. We're going to the window, she told the child. When I say now, you'll push with everything you've got. Behind her, Armando cocked the hammer. Final chance, he said. Sign or bleed. Alejandro lifted his hands slowly. Armando, he said, forcing his voice to level. You want money? You'll never use it if you shoot me. Every bank flagged your shell companies, Sandoval and Delaney Relief Trust, Ridgeview Cultural Fund. Carolina gave me names before. His voice cracked and he steadied it. You run, they catch you. Or you talk now, and maybe you breathe air that isn't cinder block gray. Armando hesitated. For the flick of a heartbeat, he saw it. The shelf-worn future of a man who had thought he was smarter than gravity. He blinked it away, jaw hardening. You always believed you were the righteous one. No, Alejandro said quietly. I'm just a father. He stepped sideways, drawing Armando's sightline with him. Paloma seized the opening. Now, she breathed. Manuela shoved. Paloma lifted the front casters, angled the chair, and muscled it toward the window. The broken sash bit Paloma's forearm, glass-slicing skin. She didn't stop. Dolores, she shouted into the dusk, voice raw. Dolores! From the tree line, an answering shout, faint but real. Aquí! Armando fired. The shot shrieked past Paloma's ear, punched through the window frame, and buried itself in the oak outside. Stop! He roared, pivoting, but smoke coughed thick across his aim, and the barn's roof crackled, dry timber snapping like teeth. Rebecca stumbled, coughing, mascara cutting new black tears. The papers! She hacked. He signs now! No one. Signs anything, Paloma barked, wheeling the child through the gap. She lifted, grit in her teeth, muscles screaming. For one terrible second, the chair snagged on a splintered sill, then popped free. Fresh night air hit their lungs like mercy. Go! Paloma cried, straight to the trees. Manuela pushed, face set, small arms pumping with the power of 10,000 whispered prayers. Dolores burst from the shadows, apron smudged, cheeks wet. She seized the handles, swung the chair toward the ditch line, and threw a look back that carried 20 years of love and 1,000 recipes worth of backbone. Paloma! Get her out! Paloma shouted. Don't stop! Inside, the world brightened to orange and gold. Alejandro coughed hard, vision swimming. Armando's silhouette loomed through the smoke, gun up, steps sure. From the opposite side, Rebecca groped for the pallet, palms hunting for metal. We finish this, she rasped. Paloma did what every woman with no weapon and too much to lose has done since the first story was told. She ran toward the danger, not away. She hit Armando from the side at the exact breath Alejandro ducked. The shot went wild again, chewing a chunk out of the barn door. The millionaire slammed his shoulder into Armando's ribs and ripped the pistol free. On your knees, Alejandro ordered, coughing, gun-trained. Soot streaked his face. A warrior, born of boardrooms and grief. Hands on your head, Armando laughed once, a dry crackle. You won't shoot. I will if you reach for my child again." The millionaire's hand didn't shake. Rebecca staggered toward the door, face a mask of ash and fury. "This isn't over," she croaked. "You can't erase me. I made you." "No," Alejandro said, voice low and terrible. "You stole me." Sirens wailed then. Far at first, then closer, the thin blue cry threading through prairie dark. Dolores had waited as long as she could. 20 minutes, maybe less. She had chosen the child over secrecy, the family over fear. Redemption wears aprons more often than capes. Armando's eyes cut toward the growing flames, then to the line of trees where Manuela had vanished with the woman who cooked Sunday roast and called herself nobody. He coiled like a snake, calculating one last strike. Paloma knew the look of a cornered animal. She stepped in front of Alejandro, inserting the fragile bulletproof shield of her own body. "No," she said simply. Armando's hand flashed too. His boot. Steel winked, small, wicked, a hidden knife. He drove forward. The gun thundered. Once. Armando stopped, surprise opening his mouth before pain closed it. He collapsed into the straw with a thud that sounded final. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. Sparks drifted in lazy arcs. Smoke swelled like a curtain. Alejandro and Paloma stared at each other, neither believing the other was still standing. Then the barn roof popped, a beam sagged, and the old place finally remembered how to fall. "Go." Alejandro grabbed Paloma's hand, heat biting their backs as they sprinted for the door. They burst into the night. Cool, blessed, loud with sirens and the ragged sob of wind. Across the ditch, Dolores had Manuela cradled against her apron, the child shaking but whole. When she saw her father, Manuela lifted both arms. He crossed the road in a stumbling run and gathered her in, gun forgotten, everything else forgotten too. "You're safe," he whispered into her hair. "You're safe, my brave girl." Behind them, flames devoured history. In front of them, red and blue lights strobed over cornstalks like some strange new dawn. Rebecca stood at the edge of the firelight, face lit, hellish. She didn't run. She stared at the family she had tried to break and at the maid she had tried to erase, and something like animal hatred twisted her features into a mask that would follow them all into dreams. "Recordings can be lost," she called over the sirens. "Files can burn, but I still know things you don't, Alejandro, about your name, about your blood." Paloma's hand closed over the phone in her pocket, its red dot still pulsing. The nanny, no. The woman who had chosen this family as fiercely as they were now choosing her, met Rebecca's gaze. "Not this time," she said, because the truth wasn't just in a file. It was in a child's steady breath, in a millionaire's shaking arms, in a maid's cut forearm and ash-streaked face, and the relentless ordinary courage that had carried them all through fire. The cruisers screeched into the lane. Doors flew open. Officers ran, shouting commands that chopped the night into orders and action. A familiar figure stepped from an unmarked sedan. Detective Luis Martinez, the name from Carolina's hidden letter. He took in the scene in a practiced, sweep flames, straw, a fallen man, a family bound together at the seams. "Alejandro Moncler," he called. Alejandro lifted his head, still holding his child. Here, Martinez's eyes narrowed, catching the fire's reflections in Paloma's apron pocket. "Do you have something for me?" he asked. Paloma nodded once, slow. "We have everything," she said. "Confession, threats, the whole web of family secrets." The detective reached for a fireproof evidence pouch and stepped toward them, and that was when a second shot cracked from the dark beyond the cruisers. Sharp, surgical, not from the barn, not from Armando. Officers ducked, sparks leapt. Paloma's ears rang as Manuela screamed and Alejandro twisted, shielding the child with his body. Someone else was here. Someone who wasn't ready to let betrayal die in the fire. Who fired that shot, and what truth would it tear open next? The gunshot. shattered what little peace had been won. Officers dropped into crouches, weapons drawn, scanning the tree line. The barn roared behind them, collapsing in a storm of embers, but all eyes turned toward the shadows. Alejandro's arms tightened around Manuela, instinct pressing her face into his shoulder. Paloma spun, heart hammering. Dolores let out a gasp that trembled in the night air. Detective Martinez barked, "Hold positions! Find that shooter!" Another shot cracked, ricocheting off the hood of a patrol car. Sparks scattered. The officers fanned out, beams of flashlights slicing through rows of corn that bordered the gravel lane. For a breath, the only sounds were the rustle of stalks, the shrill hiss of the fire, and Manuela's frightened sobs. Rebecca's laugh rose from near the barn, dry and bitter, rising like smoke. "Did you think it would end so easily? You don't know me at all." Her hands were bound behind her, wrists already cuffed by an officer moments earlier, but her tongue was free, and venom never needed shackles. Martinez shot her a glare. "Quiet." Rebecca's eyes glittered. "You think I came without backup? You think Armando was my only ally?" She tilted her head toward the tree line. "Family runs deeper than you imagine." Paloma's stomach dropped. Another ally? Someone even darker behind the curtain. She glanced at Alejandro. His face was pale, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the trees. "Who else?" he muttered under his breath. "What else are you hiding from me?" The stalks shook. Out stepped a tall man in a leather jacket, revolver gleaming under the siren lights. His hair was streaked gray, his face carved by years of hard choices, eyes cold as winter. He raised the gun casually, like a man pouring himself a drink. "Hello, little brother," he said. The words cracked Alejandro's world in half. He froze, pulse pounding in his ears. "Brother?" Rebecca smirked, triumphant despite the cuffs. "I told you, your blood holds more secrets than you'll ever understand." Paloma whispered, "Alejandro, what does he mean?" But Alejandro's voice was hollow, disbelieving. "That's impossible. My brother died before I could remember his face." The man smiled without warmth. "No, I lived. Eduardo and Elena had 2 sons. One raised in shadows, one raised in lies. You took the mansion, the company, the silver spoon. I took what was left, and now I'll take it all back." Officers shouted, forming a perimeter, but he fired first. One wild shot to scatter them, another straight toward Alejandro. Paloma screamed. Alejandro twisted, protecting Manuela with his own body. The bullet grazed his arm, tearing fabric and skin. He staggered, but didn't fall. Martinez dove, rolling behind a cruiser, pistol trained. "Drop the weapon." The man, whoever he was, laughed, backing toward the corn. "Not tonight. Tonight you learn the truth, Alejandro. Tonight you remember who you really are." He fired one more time before disappearing into the stalks, swallowed by darkness. Rebecca's eyes blazed with something feral. "He'll be back," she hissed. "And when he comes, you'll wish you'd let me raise. You blind." Alejandro's arm bled, but he barely felt it. The words, "little brother," echoed louder than pain. Paloma pressed her hand over the wound, steady, eyes meeting his. "You're not alone. Not anymore. No matter what he says, no matter who he is, you are not alone." Manuela lifted her tear-streaked face from her father's chest. "Papa," she whispered, "I'm scared." He kissed her hair, fighting to steady his voice. "So am I, Princesa. But we'll face this together." Martinez gave orders, officers spreading through the fields, radios crackling, the night alive with tension. But Alejandro knew it wasn't over. The fire might have burned down the barn, but a greater blaze had been lit, one of family secrets buried too deep, of betrayals older than his memory. And as he held his daughter and clung to the woman who had become his anchor, one thought chilled him more than the wound bleeding down his sleeve. If his brother had survived all these years in the dark, what else had survived with him, and what would happen when those shadows came knocking on their door? The sirens faded into the distance, leaving only the croak of crickets and the hiss of cooling embers where the barn had once stood. Officers combed the fields, but the shooter, the man who had called Alejandro little brother, had vanished like smoke in the wind. Alejandro sat on the bumper of a patrol car, shirt torn and stained with blood from his arm. Paloma crouched beside him, pressing a strip of bandage against the wound. Manuela clutched her father's uninjured hand, her wide eyes still swollen from tears. Detective Martinez paced in front of them, fury simmering in every step. How the hell did he get that close without anyone spotting him? And who is he, Alejandro? Did you know this man? Alejandro's voice was low, almost broken. No, not really. I was told I had a brother once, but he died before I was old enough to remember. Rebecca, sitting cuffed on the ground with 2 officers guarding her, let out a dry laugh. Oh, he's very much alive, and he's everything you should have been. Strong, ruthless, unafraid to take what's his. She leaned forward, eyes like poisoned knives. You were always the weak one. That's why I chose to keep you. Paloma's jaw clenched. Chose? You stole him from his real family. You lied to him his whole life. Rebecca's smirk widened. And it worked, didn't it? He became mine, my son, until you came along and poisoned him with your pathetic loyalty and your fairy tales about love. Martinez snapped, "Enough." But Alejandro's chest heaved, every word cutting deeper. He stood, despite Paloma's hand on his arm. "Tell me his name. If he's my brother, tell me who he is." Rebecca's silence stretched like a rope, tightening around his throat. Finally, with a twisted smile, she whispered, "Nathaniel." The name cracked open a cavern of memory. Alejandro staggered, flashes of a blurred face, a child's laugh, a shadow slipping away. He hadn't dreamed it. He hadn't imagined it. Nathaniel had always been there, hidden behind the lies. Paloma's hand found his, grounding him. "Alejandro, this isn't your fault. They built your life on secrets, but you have the power to break them now." Nathaniel's words echoed in his skull. "I'll take it all back." Martinez crouched, lowering his voice. "Listen to me. If this Nathaniel is who he says he is, then he's dangerous. He's not just some stray gunman. He's connected. He knew where you'd be. He knew how to hit you where it hurts." Alejandro swallowed hard, gazing at his daughter. Manuela clung tighter, whispering, "Papa, I don't want him to come back." He kissed her hair. "Neither do I, Princesa, but if he does, we'll be ready." Paloma looked him in the eye, fierce despite the fear in her chest. "Then we start digging. We find out everything about him, everything about your past. If the truth has been buried, we'll unearth it, even if it destroys every lie that built this house." Rebecca hissed from the ground. "Careful, Maid. Some truths are better left in the dark." Alejandro turned toward her, voice sharp as steel. "And some lies deserve to burn." The night ended with Rebecca and Armando taken away in separate cruisers, their faces lit by red and blue flashes. But Alejandro knew the victory was hollow. A larger storm was forming, one bound not just by betrayal and greed, but by blood itself. Back at the mansion, silence hung heavy over the grand halls. Manuela was finally asleep, curled against her stuffed bear. Alejandro and Paloma stood on the balcony, the moon casting silver across the garden where so much had begun. "I don't know who I am anymore," Alejandro whispered. "I thought I'd already lost everything. Carolina, my trust, my peace. Now I learn I had a brother all along, and he's this." Paloma touched his cheek, steadying him. "You're Alejandro Moncler, a father, a man who chose love over lies. That's who you are. Nathaniel can't take that from you." Alejandro leaned into her touch, but his eyes were still shadowed. Then why do I feel like this is only the beginning? Paloma's voice trembled, but she held him tighter. Because it is. And somewhere, far beyond the city lights, Nathaniel watched from the shadows, his revolver resting across his knee, his eyes burning with something between vengeance and sorrow. "This isn't over, brother," he muttered into the night. "Not until one of us has nothing left." The storm broke at dawn. Not outside. The skies over Fairfield remained cloudless and bright, but inside the Montclair estate, where the weight of truth pressed heavier than any thundercloud, Alejandro had not slept. He spent the night pacing the marble hallways, haunted by the echo of that name, Nathaniel. A brother raised in shadows, a stranger carrying his blood, a ghost turned assassin. Paloma found him in the study, staring at the family portraits Rebecca had hung years ago. Carefully, curated lies in gilded frames, he clenched a glass of untouched whiskey. All these years, I thought I was protecting Manuela from enemies outside. Turns out the enemy was inside this house all along. And now, he's family. Paloma stepped closer, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her heart. Blood doesn't make family, Alejandro. Choices do. You chose to be a father, a protector, a man of honor. That's who you are. But Alejandro's gaze darkened. Then why do I feel as though Nathaniel is the part of me I abandoned? The life I never lived, and now he wants to claim it all. Before Paloma could answer, a knock shattered the silence. Detective Martinez entered, holding a worn folder under his arm. "I pulled some old records," he said, tossing the file onto the desk. "Your past isn't what you think it is, Alejandro." Nathaniel wasn't lying. Alejandro opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were faded birth certificates, custody papers, and a grainy photo. Two boys, nearly identical, playing in a dusty Texas backyard. Alejandro's chest constricted. Two boys, him and Nathaniel. Martinez explained, "After your parents died, the state should have placed both of you in foster care. But only one child shows up in the system, you. The other vanished without a trace. Guess who handled the paperwork? Rebecca Sandoval." Paloma's face drained of color. "She separated them on purpose." Alejandro slammed the folder shut. "She stole me, and she left Nathaniel to rot." As if conjured by their words, the house phone rang. The shrill sound sliced through the air. Alejandro answered, his voice raw. "Hello?" A low, familiar chuckle bled through the line. "Brother." Alejandro froze. "Nathaniel, glad you finally remember me," the voice rasped. "I've been waiting for this day since the moment she chose you and left me in the dirt." Paloma leaned closer, whispering, "Keep him talking." Alejandro steadied his breath. "Where are you? What do you want?" Nathaniel's laugh was bitter, hollow. "What I want, justice. Everything you had, the mansion, the company, the love. While you played prince, I survived in alleys and prison yards. She raised you with silver spoons. She left me with broken teeth, and now I'll take back what was mine." Alejandro's grip on the receiver whitened. "You don't want justice, you want revenge." "Call it what you like," Nathaniel snarled. "But when I'm done, you'll finally know what it feels like to lose everything." The line went dead. Alejandro dropped the phone, his chest heaving. Paloma caught his hands. "This isn't your fault. He's twisted by what Rebecca did. But he's not you. You have to believe that." Martinez scribbled notes furiously. "We'll trace the call. He's taunting us, but that means he's close. And if he's close, he'll strike again." Just then, a scream echoed from upstairs. Alejandro bolted, Paloma on his heels. They burst into Manuela's room and froze. The window was wide open, curtains billowing in the morning breeze. Manuela sat in her chair, trembling, clutching her stuffed bear. On the wall, scrawled in black spray paint, were 3 chilling words. "She's next." Paloma knelt, gathering the child into her arms. Manuela whispered, "Papa, I woke up and the window was open. Someone was inside." Alejandro's heart shattered. Nathaniel had been in his daughter's room. Inside. Their sanctuary. He wasn't bluffing. He turned to Martinez, fury blazing in his eyes. This ends now. He wants a war? Then I'll give him one. But Paloma's voice cut through, fierce and trembling. No, Alejandro. If you fight him with hate, you'll become just like him. We need to outsmart him, not mirror him. Alejandro's breath came ragged, torn between rage and reason. He looked at Paloma, then at his terrified daughter. He knew she was right. But how do you fight a shadow that knows your every weakness? From the hall, Martinez's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and cursed. You won't believe this. The call traced back to Dallas, to the Montclair estate where your parents used to live before Rebecca took over. Nathaniel's not hiding. He's daring you to come home. Alejandro's eyes narrowed. Then that's exactly where we'll go. Paloma tightened her grip on his arm. Alejandro, wait! But the determination in his gaze was unshakable. If the answers lie in that house, I'll find them. And if my brother is waiting for me, then I'll face him. Paloma's voice quivered, but her resolve matched his. Then I'm going with you. Whatever truth we uncover, we face it together. Alejandro kissed Manuela's forehead, whispering, Stay with Dolores, you're safe here. But in his soul, he knew. Safety was an illusion until Nathaniel was stopped. As the family prepared to leave, the morning sun cast long shadows across the estate, shadows that stretched toward Dallas, where secrets, betrayal, and blood awaited, and somewhere in that abandoned Montclair mansion, Nathaniel polished the barrel of his revolver, his voice low and venomous. Come home, brother. Let's finish what she started. The Montclair estate loomed against the Texas horizon, like a ghost frozen in time. The once grand mansion, abandoned for decades, was cloaked in ivy and silence. Broken shutters rattled in the dry wind, and the gates creaked as Alejandro pushed them open. It wasn't just a house. It was the cradle of every unanswered question in his life. Paloma gripped his hand tightly. This place feels wrong. Alejandro's jaw clenched. It is wrong. This is where Rebecca buried the truth, and where Nathaniel wants me to find him. Detective Martinez's SUV rolled in behind them, headlights cutting through the shadows. We'll move in careful, he said, loading his revolver. If Nathaniel's inside, he's expecting a fight. The three stepped into the mansion. The air was heavy with mildew and dust, but something more sinister clung to the walls, memories of lives stolen. Their footsteps echoed across marble, floors cracked by time. In the entry hall, a faded portrait of Eduardo and Elena Montclair still hung. Alejandro froze at the sight of his parents, faces he barely remembered, eyes warm and kind. Next to them, the wall bore scratch marks, carved letters almost erased by age. Alejandro and Nathaniel, brothers forever. Paloma traced the marks with trembling fingers. They were just kids, and she tore them apart. Alejandro's voice broke. We were supposed to grow up together. Instead, Rebecca chose me and threw him away. A slow clap shattered the silence. From the top of the staircase, Nathaniel appeared, tall, gaunt, but eerily similar to Alejandro. His dark hair was slicked back, his eyes burning with fury. Welcome home, brother, Nathaniel sneered. Do you like what she left behind? The mansion of lies, the cradle of betrayal? Alejandro stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tremor inside. Why bring us here? Why torment Manuela? She's innocent. Innocent? Nathaniel's laugh echoed through the hollow corridors. No one in this cursed bloodline is innocent. She has your eyes, Alejandro. The same eyes that Rebecca chose. Over mine. Every time I look at her, I see the life I should have had. Paloma's voice cut sharp. You were a child, Nathaniel. Rebecca destroyed you both, but Manuela doesn't deserve your hatred. Nathaniel's eyes flickered, just for A second at her words, but then his jaw hardened. Rebecca gave you the mansion, the company, the family name. She gave me nothing but hunger and fists in foster homes. You think I can forget that? Forgive that? Martinez raised his gun. Nathaniel, it's over. Put the weapon down. But Nathaniel's revolver was already in his hand, gleaming under the fractured chandelier. Don't preach to me, detective. You weren't the boy left in alleys to fight rats for food. You didn't spend years plotting how to take back what was stolen. Alejandro lifted his palms slowly. If it's me you want, take me. But leave my daughter out of this. Nathaniel's laugh was bitter. That's where you're wrong. Brother, I don't just want you dead. I want her to grow up knowing her father failed her, just like mine failed me. Paloma gasped. Your father never failed you. Rebecca stole him from you. Eduardo and Elena loved both of you. The words struck him like a knife. Nathaniel staggered for a moment, his rage colliding with memories he had buried. Lies, he hissed, though his hand trembled on the gun. Alejandro reached into his coat slowly and pulled out the letter from Carolina, the one Paloma had found in the desvan. He tossed it onto the floor. Read it. She knew. Carolina discovered Rebecca and Armando's crimes. She wanted to save you too, Nathaniel. The paper fluttered near Nathaniel's boots. He hesitated, lowering the revolver just an inch. His eyes darted between the letter and Alejandro's face. But before he could move, another sound pierced the air, heels striking marble. Rebecca. She emerged from the shadows, her wrist still scarred from the police raid, her eyes burning with manic fury. She had escaped custody, her presence more terrifying than ever. Don't listen to him, Nathaniel, she hissed. He's twisting you like Carolina tried to twist me. Remember who saved you, who made you strong. Nathaniel's grip tightened on the revolver. You saved me, you abandoned me. Rebecca's voice turned venomous. I chose the son who mattered, and it wasn't you. The words detonated in the air. Nathaniel's face crumpled, torn between rage and heartbreak. For the first time, Alejandro saw not a villain, but a boy, broken, discarded, still begging for love he never received. Rebecca lunged toward Paloma, grabbing her by the arm. You don't belong here. You ruined everything. Alejandro roared, rushing forward. Martinez aimed his revolver, but Nathaniel moved first. His gun swung, not at Alejandro, not at Paloma, but at Rebecca. You ruined me, Nathaniel growled. His finger hovered on the trigger, sweat dripping from his brow. The mansion held its breath. One bullet could end it all. But whose blood would stain the Montclair floors this time? The chandelier above the Montclair mansion quivered as if the house itself sensed the climax of decades of secrets. Nathaniel's revolver was aimed squarely at Rebecca, his hand trembling with years of rage ready to explode. Alejandro's voice thundered through the hollow hall. Nathaniel, don't let her make you a monster like her. You still have a choice. Rebecca hissed, clutching Paloma's arm like a viper coiled to strike. He'll never choose you, Alejandro. He's my son, not yours. Nathaniel's lips trembled. Your son. You never wanted me. You fed me to wolves and called it survival. Martinez steadied his weapon. Nathaniel, you pull that trigger, you'll lose the chance to prove you're different from her. For one suspended heartbeat, time froze. The revolver wavered. Rebecca sneered, venom dripping from her every word. Weak. You'll always be weak. And then the gunshot. The echo thundered through the mansion like judgment itself. Rebecca stumbled backward, clutching her shoulder. The revolver clattered to the floor, kicked away by Alejandro as Nathaniel collapsed to his knees. Sobbing, I just wanted her to admit it, he whispered, that she never loved me. Paloma tore free from Rebecca's grasp and rushed to Alejandro's side. Martinez's men swarmed the hall, cuffing Rebecca as she screamed curses, her empire of lies finally crumbling into dust. Rebecca Montclair, you're under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, and attempted murder, Martinez declared, his voice cold and final. As she was dragged away, Her last words echoed like a dying curse. "Without me, none of you would exist. You'll see, I was the one who made this family." Alejandro knelt before Nathaniel, who trembled with the face of a man broken, but not beyond redemption. "You are my brother," Alejandro said softly. "Rebecca destroyed us both. But you can still choose another path. Manuela deserves to know her uncle as more than a shadow." Nathaniel wept openly, dropping his head into his hands. For the first time in years, he wasn't a predator, just a lost boy who had finally run out of hatred. Weeks later, the Montclair mansion was transformed. The rooms once filled with whispers of cruelty now rang with laughter and light. The garden bloomed again, Paloma's touch softening every corner. Manuela wheeled herself across the yard, her smile radiant, as Alejandro pushed her gently under the shade of a tree. "Daddy," she said, "are we safe now?" Alejandro kissed her forehead. "Yes, princess, we're safe, because love always wins in the end." Nathaniel, under protective custody, began cooperating with investigators, exposing Rebecca and Armando's network of crimes. Though haunted by his past, he found a measure of peace knowing that Manuela would never grow up in the darkness that had swallowed him. Paloma joined Alejandro in the garden, her hand slipping into his. "Do you ever think about how close we were to losing everything?" Alejandro smiled faintly. "Every day, and that's why I'll never stop being grateful that we found each other." Manuela giggled. "Does that mean you two are finally getting married for real?" Alejandro laughed, pulling Paloma close. "It means we're already a family, but yes, soon we'll make it official." The wedding was small, held under the oak tree where their love first blossomed. Neighbors, friends, and Detective Martinez gathered. Nathaniel, though absent, sent a letter of apology, his first step toward redemption. When Paloma walked down the aisle, Manuela scattered rose petals from her wheelchair, her eyes shining with joy. Alejandro's voice shook as he promised, "To love you, protect you, and cherish you for as long as I live." Paloma whispered back, "To love you, heal you, and build with you a life full of light." They kissed, sealing not just a marriage, but the rebirth of a family forged in fire and purified by truth. Months later, Paloma and Alejandro tucked Manuela into bed. She looked up with sleepy eyes. "Mommy, Daddy, do you think angels ever come to visit us?" Alejandro glanced at Paloma. "Why do you ask, princess?" "Because sometimes when you both smile, I feel like Mommy Carolina is still here." Paloma kissed her forehead. "She is, sweetheart. She lives in you, in us." Manuela drifted off to sleep, her hand clutching her teddy bear. Alejandro pulled Paloma close as they watched her breathe peacefully. "I'm John Parker, and remember, every story hides a truth. The truth of this story was simple. Family is not built on blood, but on sacrifice, forgiveness, and the courage to love when it seems impossible. So tell me, dear listener, do you believe that love can heal the deepest wounds? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can share more stories that touch the heart. Because in the end, no betrayal, no secret, no storm is stronger than love itself.